when Donald Trump said last week in New York that climate change was a con and that energy policy was killing countries like ours, many dismissed it as the lies and lines you'd expect from this president. But what about much the same coming from former president of the ACTU, Jennie George? For a long time now, the former president and former Labor MP George has been sounding the alarm about the coming crisis in energy affordability and reliability. And in a piece she wrote in The Australian over the weekend, this former Labor stalwart didn't miss. She said that the Albanese government's pressing ahead with, quote, with an energy transition based on intermittent, weather-dependent renewables, regardless of emerging problems. She said that the 2035 targets are politically determined, set at 62 to 70%, even though Labor's current 2030 targets won't be met. Setting higher targets, she said, can't mask the fundamental problems of a targets-driven transition. It will satisfy an international audience, but will fail our domestic needs. Climate Minister Chris Bowen, she went on and said, remains blind to the reality our economy can't be powered by intermittent, weather-dependent renewables, nor are they the cheapest form of energy when whole-of-system costs are included. That's why the government refuses to release full costings, she said. Without the billions in taxpayer-funded subsidies and relief packages, Labor's transition may have collapsed by now and still may. It's magic pudding economics, says this former president of the ACTU, and it's not sustainable, she declared. Well, Jennie George, a Labor icon, is absolutely right. The crunch will come, as Jennie George says, when more coal-fired power exits the system, such as the giant Eraring power station in New South Wales, the country's biggest, earlier slated to close this year, but now with its life extended via taxpayer subsidies from the New South Wales government. The Albanese government says this so-called green transition, this decarbonised process, is unstoppable. But that's wrong. It's not happening any near to this extent overseas as it's happening in Australia, because in part other countries are waking up. Their targets are a lot lower than ours, and that's where they even have targets. Don't forget the world's biggest emitters are having none of Chris Bowen's green revolution. And most are doing what former UK Labor PM Tony Blair is urging us to do, to walk away from net zero by 2050 because, he argues, it's doomed to fail. As a country, we are in desperate need for real leadership on energy policy. The government, it's a hopeless case. So enough nasal gazing from the Liberals. The opposition must expedite its energy policy review. It's not as if this is a new issue, is it? And if the leader won't do it, then sorry, change the leader. 12 months to review where you stand on something as fundamental as our energy sovereignty says everything you need to know about a Liberal Party that's lost sight of what they stand for. Now to immigration, and a shock government report quietly dropped out that few others appear to have picked up. In Australia, the main drive for exploding migrant numbers is so-called export education. Now, if you think people come here to study because our universities are so good, well, think again. Most of them don't even rank in the world's top 100. But still they come because we offer, under the table, something that few other Western countries do, and that's a backdoor way to turn a stint studying here into permanent residency. Add in our generous health and welfare safety net and handouts for this and handouts for that, and that's why Australia is chosen. And confirmation that the federal government knows this is happening has just been confirmed by an official government report. Sure, the experts claim that we have a strictly skills-based immigration system that's boosting productivity and prosperity, but again, that's not right. As the government's own report by Jobs and Skills Australia confirms, for many students, migration aspirations are a primary goal. The report goes on, graduates, they say, well, their persistence means that they have become an important feeder group to Australia's permanent migration program due to an increasing trend towards international students transitioning to permanent residence. Now, for years, Australians have been told by successive governments that overseas students are especially good for us because they're a rich stream of revenue and a source of highly desirable, highly skilled migrants. So we should allow them to stay. But as the pandemic showed, when all the students went home, it wasn't brain surgeons and rocket scientists that we're suddenly short of, but it was drivers and cleaners and waiters and fruit pickers, which busts the myth from the politicians that our migrants are highly skilled, when mostly they are not. There are currently just over 700,000 people in Australia on student visas, and just over another 200,000 former students here for a temporary period as graduates. And nearly all of them, close to 1 million, are aiming to stay. The report goes on, some overseas students, it says, do not regularly engage with Australians, often living and working with people from their own culture, which limits their exposure to Australian working and communication habits and may degrade their language skills. The report says more than half of international students remain in Australia permanently once they graduate, and that more than 50% are employed well below their skill levels, and many are working outside their field of qualifications. Now, let me say that again. This is an official government report out last week that more than half of the people we let into this country to study never, ever return home. If you're wondering why your Uber drivers nearly always a recent graduate born outside Australia, well, now you know. It's because export education's become a migration scam, allowing people to get here under false pretences. You can hardly blame the students, they want a better life, but I tell you what, you should blame successive governments for tolerating this racket. And while I'm at it on the issue of dubious migration, how about this footage from Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke personally greeting a plane load of people from Gaza that landed in Sydney last week? More people out of a terrorist war zone that government officials have admitted they do not have the capacity to vet properly as a security risk.
Some individuals claim their visitor visa for relatives were approved within 1 hour.
It is possible.
Sure, but how could you possibly do all the necessary security and other checks in just an hour from an applicant? I mean, that's lightning speed approval.
When we apply that vast range of information to consideration of visitor visas, so if you look globally, a very large number of our visitor visas would be done inside an hour.
Other than a big Muslim population in his electorate, why was Burke there? I mean, I've never seen an immigration minister meeting visa holders at the airport and then dodging questions from the media when asked why he's there. Already Australia has issued some 3,000 visas to Gazans, and from what we know already, almost all of the people that have arrived to date have stayed here and now applied to stay or be considered as refugees. So here's some questions for the Minister. How many visas has Labor now issued to Gazans? How do we know that they're not supporters of the banned terrorist group Hamas? How well are they security checked? Now here, how many of them have applied for refugee status? And how many have been accepted? What support are they receiving? What welfare, if any, is being provided? Free childcare? Free education, income and rental support. We know that a number of state governments have already signalled that they will get free healthcare. Well, what else? Australians are paying the cost of all of this, and they've got a right to this information. If the minister can front up to the airport to meet them, then Tony Burke needs to front up to the media and provide this information to the Australian public.